Every now and then, I'll be interacting with someone and they'll tell me, uh, they'll use a phrase that is common. I hear it a lot. They'll say, I'm more spiritual than I am religious. I get that. I understand. There are many people that really want to be more spiritual in their interaction with the divine, with God, and I understand. And there are varying degrees of spirituality in that regard. But I do want to kind of offer them a little bit of a challenge as to whether or not they're very religious. Let me explain. The idea of being very religious, I get it. People are wanting to avoid what they see to be the hypocrisy of insincere practice. They'd rather value sincerity over, say, someone who just goes through the motions and doesn't really mean it. It's totally understandable. You certainly don't want to descend into that level of what might have been the religious zealots of the ancient world that were responsible for executing Jesus in the first place. So to avoid that, many people will value, say, what they consider to be sincere personal belief over, say, some, what they consider to be empty practice. That's just kind of this outward show of being pious, but doesn't really reflect what's going on in the heart, which again, understandable. But I do want to challenge them as to whether or not if they're not already really religious in the first place. What I mean by that is they already have, and most humans do, have a strong instinct for separating the sacred from the common. And what do I mean by sacred? Tell you what I mean. The idea of something being sacred merely means that it's set apart for distinct use. And I know I'm using a very general term here, but the idea that if you're going to separate something for, say, a distinct use, but it's not for common use. For example, my backyard has a fence around it. Why? Because I'm trying to set it apart for my use, as opposed to my front yard, where you might have stray dogs walking through, or other things that occur there. People may walk by, but I won't nearly be as alarmed that way than, say, if someone was walking past through the backyard, or if a dog was walking through the backyard, because that means they jumped the fence. They ignored my obvious indicator that this was set apart for my use. Well, in like manner, we make things sacred to us all the time. We designate and set things apart for a distinct use as opposed to common use. If a person's in construction and they're on the job site, they may say, this is my hammer, I use it a lot. I'm not setting it out there in the community tools where anyone can use it. This is set apart for my use, not for common use. And so that, therefore, it's somewhat sacred to me. Well, we do that with our relationships all the time. In all of our human relationships, whether it's with children, parents to children, spouses to each other, extended families, we all have ways in which we separate the sacred from the common. This communicates my relationship in a manner that this does not. This is a special place to have dinner, or to, a specific tradition our family has, as opposed to everything else, which just like any other that anyone else might do. So there are ways in which we separate the sacred from the common all the time. In our regular relationships, this is a natural instinct. No one would fault you for ways in which you do this with a spouse or with children. So if a relationship is actually that important to us, we go all about separating the sacred from the common and engaging in practices that communicate how important that relationship is to us in our normal material world. So therefore, for the one who says that the relationship with God is that important to them, that is a very natural instinct to engage the materiality of that relationship, all the outward trappings, all the outward showings of ways in which you show how important that relationship is to you. Certainly someone could do that with, in an insincere capacity, just going through the motions, and they don't mean it. But I do challenge that person who really does mean it, and that yet seeks out no manner of expressing it in the material world that we live in. On the contrary, if a relationship with God is as important to you as every other human relationship you might have, you will find ways to separate the sacred from the common. You'll have sacred space, you'll have sacred times. You may even have sacred objects and offices, people that help you interact with the divine in some way. Sacred all manner of sacred practices that assist you in expressing that relationship. So oftentimes people will say, I'm more religious, spiritual than religious, but I've yet to come across someone who's intensely spiritual who has no religious instincts at all. On the contrary, as humans, we tend to naturally gravitate there. As St. Matthias, here in our service, we are inventing anything new. We are simply facilitating your normal human expression of how, of all those ways, in that separation of the sacred from the common, you engage those sacred things to express your love of God, that we're in thankfulness for the redemption we have in Jesus Christ. It's a very human instinct that has continuity across all of humanity and across all cultures that you can study. So when you join us, don't think about that you're adopting some sort of religious instinct. You're actually just giving yourself over to what is a very natural human expression, and it should feel natural as you go. That's my 2 cents. I hope you have a great day.